My name is Molly Waller, and I work in the Alumni Relations Department. I work alongside Tom Richmond, and Tom and I have the pleasure of engaging with our 70,000 alumni who live across the globe every day, every week, every month, and certainly this is a highlight. Before we get started, we are always curious. Please raise your hand if you are a proud Bradley alumni. Awesome, awesome. Let's give ourselves a round of applause. Thank you for being here. Before we get started with today's lecture by Dr. Wendy Davis, who's here from Utah, she is also an alum, I'd like to just share today's agenda so we all enjoy the festivities that we've planned today. You are at the lecture. You're in the right place. It will begin in a moment. This will be from about 4 to 5. At 5 o'clock, we'll enjoy an open house on the first floor from 5 to 7. There will be a 6 p.m. program in which you will all have the opportunity to meet Lydia Moss Bradley. President Shadid will join us there as well. I hope when you checked in, you all grabbed your Find the Lydias card. This is an opportunity for you to walk across campus while you're here today and win a prize. Please go find the 4 Lydias, enjoy campus. I understand that Lydia has had a wonderful bath and spruce up for the occasion. Come back to the registration table and you'll win a fabulous prize. Also today, there will be a photo booth out on the alumni quad, so please go enjoy the 360 photo booth, take some pictures. The library is open and the bookstore is open with a discount of 10% for all of you today. For now, we are here to learn more about Lydia Moss Bradley. I'd like to introduce Lynette Steger from the Peoria Women's Club. She is a 3rd-generation alumni and also a vice president of the Peoria Women's Club. Lynette approached us last year and said, hey, let's do a partnered birthday celebration for Lydia. And we said, sure. Many of us enjoyed a ladies-only Lydia celebration. It was off campus last summer. And this summer, we're continuing the tradition. And with their partnership, we brought it on campus. And we so appreciate your help and you initiating that idea with us. Lynette, we want to thank you for championing Lydia's story. And please, everyone, help show me some appreciation for Lynette Steger.
Thank you, Molly. Well, happy birthday, everyone. I will tell you, it is also Judy Beck's birthday today in the back of the room. So what a nice day to celebrate with Lydia. Well, as Molly said, my name is Lynette Steger, and I am a proud 3rd-generation alumni of Bradley University, married to a 3rd-generation alumni from Bradley University. 4 years before Bradley University, Lydia Moss actually helped the women of Peoria find their voice by supporting the woman-led construction of the 1893 clubhouse at Fayette and Madison. This was on land that she owned, and she provided 1/3 of the funding to add the 432-seat theater to the 2nd floor. Today, the Peoria Women's Club is the 2nd oldest continuously owned by its members club in the United States, and it's home to the oldest theater in Peoria. Since 2019, the club has been undergoing a $5 million restoration, and it's an effort as ambitious as our legacy. And like Bradley University, we are a cornerstone of this community's history, carrying forward a proud tradition of service, civic engagement, and lifelong learning. In a post-COVID world, collaboration isn't just important, it's essential to the health and resilience of our community. That's why, of course, a year ago, we launched this annual celebration in partnership with our friends here at Bradley University. This year, we deepened our commitment with a community work day at Springdale Cemetery, where Bradley faculty, staff, PCW members, and volunteers of all ages came together to help restore the grave sites of Lydia, her family. We also honored Lucy Ting, the first woman elected to the school board in Peoria in 1895, ensuring that the legacies of pioneering women would not only be remembered, but renewed. We invite you to join us again next year, of course, not only for this celebration, but at Springdale as well, where we will continue honoring the women who helped shape this community. And now, it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Wendy Davis, my friend for over 40 years. Growing up in Everett Dirksen's hometown, Wendy began her political journey as a teenager with a bold ambition to be Illinois' first female governor. That drive led her to Bradley University, where she studied political science, worked for her Illinois state senator, and competed on our renowned speech team, contributing to 4 national championship wins. These experiences sharpened both her voice and her commitment to public service. Dr. Davis went on to earn her master's degree in political science. It's lost its battery. Oh, there it goes. Dr. Davis went on to earn her master's degree in political science from Virginia Tech, and after 10 years of working nights and weekends and being a grandmother to 10 grandchildren, completed her PhD in political science at the University of Utah in 2019. Her research on pre-K funding and legislative change reflects a lifelong dedication to education, equity, and policy innovation. Professionally, Dr. Davis is the Chief Experience Officer at Agile Cloud Consulting, where she specializes in higher education and nonprofit technology strategy. Her work has taken her to colleges and universities in every state and around the world. She has served 2 terms on the Bradley Alumni Board of Directors and led regional PTA advocacy efforts, chaired her city's HUD grant-making committee, and helped dozens of women run for office through the Women's Democratic Club of Utah. Last year, she was honored and celebrated by Utah's 40 Over 40 organization, a nonprofit committed to honoring and celebrating women over 40 for their exceptional achievements and outstanding contributions. She is also an author of The Fight You Do Not See, a memoir of resilience, politics, and the hidden challenges of public life. Please join me in welcoming the remarkable Dr. Wendy Davis.
Thanks, my friend. I might need Lynette to intro me everywhere. It has been my honor to learn about the life and legacy of Lydia Moss Bradley in preparation for today. Lydia Moss Bradley was a remarkable woman whose life was shaped by profound personal tragedy and an extraordinary drive to leave a lasting legacy for the betterment of society. She did so quietly, but with intent. Her decisions were measured, but informed, and she made a lot of really great decisions. My husband, Dean, for the past several months, has had to listen to every fact that I have learned about Lydia Moss Bradley. And he has done so patiently. And it often ends with a chorus of wows and can you believe it? And yes, she truly is remarkable. After her passing, Albion Smith with the University of Chicago said this about Mrs. Bradley. Her life consisted not in thinking, not in dreaming, but in doing. And I love that quotation. The investments that she and Tobias made early in their marriage, coupled with their entry into multiple business endeavors and land investments, afforded them the privilege to keep investing in Peoria. This, in turn, allowed Lydia to invest in the people, causes, and ideas that mattered most to her. I suspect that if Mrs. Bradley were here today, that she would not relish in the spotlight. She would definitely turn the spotlight on others, as she often did. By all accounts, her circle of friends was quite small, and she lived a comfortable life at the homestead farm on Moss Avenue. She didn't come from old money, not names that we would recognize like a Rockefeller or a Vanderbilt, but they built their wealth 1 acre of land at a time, 1 business investment at a time. very thoughtfully. And what she did for this community, she did thoughtfully without a lot of fanfare, except for maybe one occasion. Come back with me, the Wayback Machine, to 1897 at the dedication of Bradley Polytechnic Institute. Let's set the stage just a little bit. That day, people had come from all over the state of Illinois. A trainload of people came from Chicago. Everyone who was anyone was invited, and they came, descended upon Peoria to dedicate Bradley Hall and Bradley Polytechnic Institute. I wanted to start with this imagery because we owe so much to Lydia Moss Bradley. Everything that we have here today on campus is because of her innovation. And Bradley Hall, which sits just on the other side of us here, it's a beautiful building, and it's undergone an amazing transformation in the years that it was dedicated. And one of the things that was most important to Lydia about this institution, she wanted to make sure that the learning imparted here at Bradley Polytechnic Institute, which we now call Bradley University, would be a benefit to the young people of Peoria and the vicinity. As we conclude our talk later today, we'll talk and see about how are we doing? Are we living up to her vision to be this amazing institute for Peoria and the surrounding community? Through the next several minutes, we're going to walk through some key events in Lydia's life. Before I do that, this is really important. The one thing that she told the trustees when she started the institute, and this is something that I will probably say 7 times because I think it's that important. The first object of the institute was to furnish students with the means of living an independent, industrious, and useful life. That was really important to Lydia, and a theme that's carried in everything that she has done. So we're going to spend a few minutes learning a little bit about her life. My hope is that today you learn something new. I know that there's a lot known about Lydia Moss Bradley, but maybe there's a golden nugget that you don't know. I've read countless books, watched videos, articles, gone deep in the rabbit holes of research, which is exactly what historians and social scientists do. And it is my honor to impart a little bit of information that I've learned here today. We'll talk specifically, there are so many things we could talk about. She was a tremendous philanthropist in Peoria, but I'm going to follow the thread that got us to Bradley Polytechnic Institute and how that decision was made. And when I started working on this project a couple months ago and talked to Lynette and talked to Molly, I said, to me, someone's legacy isn't in buildings and grounds and statues. Their legacy is what they created so that those who came after would have a benefit. So we're going to follow 3 different women who graduated from Bradley. The very first graduate of Bradley Polytechnic Institute, one who graduated at the 50-year mark, and one who graduated 100 years after Bradley was established. And I can't wait to share their stories with you. All right, let's go back to happy birthday to Lydia, July 31st, right? It's also Harry Potter's birthday, as well as someone in the back, in case you needed that. Lydia was born in a city called Vevey, Indiana. I know it looks like it says Vevey, but it's actually Vevey. And she was born to Zelie and Jenny Moss. Her dad was a captain in the Revolutionary War, and her grandfather was a chaplain in that war as well. In case you don't know where Vevey is, and I didn't, it's about midway between Cincinnati and Louisville, Kentucky, right on the Ohio River. Established by Swiss settlers in the early 1800s and had about 4,000 residents when she was a young girl there. She was a frontier gal. She grew up on a farm. Everybody was a farmer back then, right? She grew up on a farm, but she did attend school at Mrs. Campbell's log cabin. That is not Mrs. Campbell's log cabin, I want you to know. That is what a log cabin in Indiana would have looked like in the early 1800s. But she writes about attending school there and having formal education where they learned to read and write. They either sat on the dirt floor or they sat on a bench, but they also learned domestic arts. She learned how to churn her own butter, something she did through her whole life. I don't know how you do this, but like extracting lard is a thing and preserving the meat, she knew how to do that. She also was into spinning and making her own clothes. She actually made the clothes that she and Tobias wore for their wedding. I have often wondered how her frontier education informed her thought process when she thought about what she was going to do as a legacy. And I have to believe that those core values that she gained as a very young child, those are deeply rooted in you. You have Midwest roots that never leaves. No matter how far away you move, like Utah 30 years ago, you're still a Midwesterner at your heart, right? And I firmly believe that that hard work ethic was really important to her. It's like the grandma waving to the kid out there. Lydia met Tobias in the 1830s, and let me tell you how. She was a businesswoman. Her dad had given her a horse when she was a young girl. She decided to sell that horse, and she purchased a parcel of land. And that land had timber on it. She herself felled those trees, hauled them to the sawmill, and guess who worked at the sawmill? Tobias Bradley. That's who worked at the sawmill. They were married in May of 1837, and for the first couple years of their life, they lived with mom and dad there in Vevey, Indiana. Well, her older brother, William, had moved to Peoria. Boy, he was a character. That's somebody I'd like to sit around the hearth with and have a drink and hear what happened in his life, because he seemed to be something else. Mr. Moss, her father, Zelie, was in Peoria in 1839 visiting William and unfortunately passed away. It was a very quick illness. He was okay, then he wasn't okay. So that left her mother as a widow, and she and Tobias remained in Vevey with mom for quite a while. But persuaded by her brother, as were almost all of her siblings, they moved to Peoria in 1847. What was going on in the United States in 1847? I thought we should take a little bit of a look at that. This is an important date in Utah history. What's that? The Mexican-American War. That's exactly right. This is an important date in Utah history. We just celebrated July 24th last week. It's bigger than Independence Day in Utah because it is the day that Brigham Young entered the Salt Lake Valley with the first group of Mormon pioneers. That's how long ago that was. Also the year we had the first postage stamp. If any of you have had those Necco wafers, they were created in the 1800s. They should have left them in the 1800s, right? Also, the height of the famine in Ireland. And in addition to that, Emily Bronte published her novel, Jane Eyre. Let me get caught up on my notes here just a little bit. William Moss was very influential in the success of Tobias and Lydia Bradley when they first moved here. Like I said, he had already been here. He was an established businessman, and he and Tobias went into business together. We could spend an entire lecture talking about their business endeavors, how they grew commerce in Peoria and in central Illinois. But two things that they did, which were rather important. William got a burned-out steamboat from St. Louis, hauled it up here, fixed it up, and Tobias became the steamboat captain on the Illinois River and was piloting that boat for a long time. They also invested in not one, not two, but three railroads. And they invested in railways that were going to connect us to the major cities, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Chicago, and St. Louis. So recognizing that if we could get things to Peoria, we could get things done. That was them. Another thing that's important about this period of time is that we're moving from an agrarian society where we're all farmers to experiencing the American Industrial Revolution. There was a lot of opportunity. And the thing about the Bradleys, they came to Peoria with $7,000, which is not an insignificant amount of money. I wish I had $7,000 in my pocket today. Back then, it was a lot of money. That was from land investments, mainly in Vevey. It was also some inheritance, and her grandfather had given her a substantive gift on her wedding. With that $7,000, they bought this bluff, right, that we are standing on today. And the end of the story, Tobias passes away. We'll talk about that in a moment. But Lydia continues to go back to those farming roots again and again and again, makes really smart decisions about land investments all over central Illinois, and alters the landscape of agriculture in this particular region. So a lot's going on in the world. Here's a picture of the Moss home. I know that you've all probably been there. It's just down the street. There was no AI used in the production of this lecture with the exception of pictures. I did take the liberty and I colorized a couple of the pictures. I know maybe it's taboo to do that. I don't mind seeing It's a Wonderful Life in color. It doesn't bother me. So it helps me understand people a little bit better to see their life in full on color. Where there were successes, there were also significant tragedies for the Bradleys. I think everybody's probably familiar with the fact that Lydia and Tobias had 6 children, and all 6 of their children died. And as I watched interviews about Lydia Moss Bradley over the years, and I don't think people mean to do this, they talk about her resilience and her, ability to overcome tragedy. It had to have been awful. It had to have been awful. And I created this timeline just to give you some perception. So for a very long time, they had children. Her first 2 children were born in Indiana and then died in Illinois. You can see the timeline. Her daughter that lived the longest, I think we all know, is Laura Bradley, her beloved daughter. Laura lived to be 14. Most of her children didn't live past the age of 5. No one died in childbirth. A couple died in infancy. Most of them passed away when they were toddlers. But Laura lived the longest. Listen, we don't know why. We don't know why. There was no cause of death back then. We don't know. This was before vaccines. This was before antibiotics, right? This is before we cut people open to find out. It was before x-rays, before anything. Before we knew that bee stings could kill you, right? In 1850, 50% of the people died before the age of 35. So the mortality rate was a lot different. We do not know why these children passed away. After their children tragically died, they wanted to figure out a way to honor the memory of these children. And they considered a lot of things. And one of the things they considered was starting an orphanage. And she and Tobias traveled to Montreal to explore that as a business possibility. But it didn't set quite well with her. Remember that frontier education. Remember what she valued: hard work, industrious, useful life. She said that the children were raised but not educated. They were dependents but not independent. So they kind of put the idea of the orphanage, they just kind of let that simmer for a little bit. In May of 1876, Tobias was traveling in Tazewell County when he had a buggy accident. Not exactly sure what happened. Perhaps the axle broke on the buggy. He fell off, horse kicked him in the head. He died of a traumatic brain injury a couple of days later. So all 6 of her children have passed away. He dies at the age of 56 and leaves her a widow in 1867. She still went into her garden and tended her roses, worked in the kitchen, collected eggs. And one day, the day when it came to bury Tobias, she donned her finest black dress and joined the mourners who gathered from Peoria throughout the county. As was custom of the day, she put a mourning brooch on her neck with his picture and a lock of his hair, and she wore that brooch every day of her life. It would remain an external token of her internal grief. It is not lost on me that because Mrs. Bradley had no children who lived, that she didn't really have anyone to pass her wealth on to. She was an aunt to many. She could have chosen to do a lot of different things with her money. But this university exists because the people she lost the most passed away. And she decided that this institution was how she wanted to serve her community and to honor her children. And because of that, tens of thousands of students have passed through these doors, earned their degrees, and hopefully have honored Lydia Moss Bradley's objective that they live an independent, industrious, and useful life. So how did this idea come about for Bradley Polytechnic Institute? So think about this. Tobias died in 1867. Bradley was established 30 years later. 30 years. She was very intentional with her wishes and what she did. So this is a little bit of what we know about how it came about. Her business manager was W.W. Hammond. He'd originally been her lawyer, the first one to draw up her initial will, and also the one to battle for the Tobias Bradley estate. In 1867, there was no rights of joint property in America for men and women in a marital relationship. And she did not have access to his accounts, to his businesses. She had to fight for those rights, right? It took a couple years to settle the estate, and when it was all said and done, it was worth $500,000. In 1860 dollars, but today's dollars, $12 million. not an insignificant amount of money. So Mr. Hammond tells us that the first time that the Institute appeared in her will was 1884. It's pretty significant there. What happened was that the next time one of the times that she revised her will, it was always her intention that the Institute be established after her death. Everything was planned after she died, after she died, after she died. But in 1892, she revised her will slightly. That was basically like, well, if I'm around and I have something to do with this, then y'all can take care of it after I die, right? So what happened in 1892 that might have changed her mind just a little bit? Well, something fabulous happened in 1892. In 1892, apparently it was all the rage to make watches in this country and bicycles. It's predated cars, right? So Mr. Parsons had a horology school in LaPorte, Indiana. If you don't know what horology is, it's the old Latin word for watchmaking. Busting at the seams, had hundreds and hundreds of students, couldn't afford more equipment, couldn't afford more space. We don't know how Mrs. Bradley found out about this business opportunity. She was from Indiana. She was very well connected financially. Her husband had started the bank, the First National Bank in Peoria, and as an honor to her husband, she was appointed as a board member to the bank, the first woman in Peoria, in Illinois, in the United States of America to sit on the board of a bank. She was very well connected to smart people who knew about investments. She bought a controlling interest in the school, got her trained, put the staff, faculty, equipment, and students on, and rode them to Peoria, Illinois. They set up shop at the Peoria Watch Factory on Fredonia Street. Here's one of my very favorite things about Lydia Moss Bradley, and I think this is a leadership attribute that people should still adhere to today. She hired the right people and got out of the way. She did not meddle in this business. Mr. Parsons remained at the head of that school. He was allowed to appoint the director. He knew watchmaking, she didn't. But this was the first foray to Mrs. Bradley thinking, maybe, just maybe, this could be an interesting experiment and we could do something different with this next, right? So the success of that was really an impetus for what drove her. I don't know if you knew this. I found this late in the game, but she appeared in an article in Scientific American in 1893, and it's about her purchase of the school and moving it to Peoria. I thought that was pretty cool. From 1884 till 1897, so in those 12 years or so, Mrs. Bradley, when she knew she wanted to start an institute, she knew that $500,000 was not enough money, and she was intentional about growing her wealth to be able to sustain this institution for as long as it needed to be sustained. She grew her wealth from $500,000 to $2 million. In 1900 money, $75 million. She was one smart lady. I have to tell you just one story. She was very intentional about what she did. Across the river in Manitou, there was a marshy area. This was very prominent in Illinois in the 1800s. A lot of things were marshy, and they would drain it. They would reroute creeks and rivers and drain the farmland. She owned about 680 acres of that farmland, and she purchased it for $10 an acre, knowing it was pretty much unusable. They drain the land, they get the farm buildings built, she hires the right people, they plant the corn, and it doesn't grow. It fails miserably. She doesn't give up. She has the farmers get the soil. She sends her business manager to the University of Illinois. What's wrong with the dirt? Mrs. Bradley's trying to grow crops. What's wrong with the dirt? They analyzed the soil and said, it's the richest topsoil we ever did see. It's missing one core element, potash. No one had ever heard of potash. I'm from Utah. I know what potash is, right down in Moab. It's in New Mexico. But back then, the only place they knew where to get potash was from Germany. So Mrs. Bradley had enough means to order a case, a crate, I don't know, of whatever this was, potash, from Germany. It was shipped over. They put that on 100 acres of that farmland, and the corn grew and grew and grew. She converted that $10 an acre investment to $140 an acre. That is how she grew her wealth. She grew her wealth so that people like me could come to this university 100 years after it was established. That is a true gift. To me, that is the legacy of Lydia Moss Bradley. So, After 1982, so I'm a few pages behind here, we're going to fast forward just a little bit. I shared that intro scene, if you will, about the Institute being established, and we could give an entirely different lecture about that day. It was absolutely fabulous. The U.S. Secretary of the Treasury spoke. He gave the dedicatory prayer. After he spoke, Mrs. Bradley got up, and she had the keys literally to the door of the university tied with red and white ribbon and handed them to Mr. Bailey, who was the president of the Board of Trustees, in a very symbolic move. A little bit about the horology school. Obviously, it became part of Bradley Polytechnic Institute when that was established in 1897. In case you wonder what they do in horology school, first of all, it was a trade school before we called them trade schools. Very specific skill sets needed. Did a little bit of watchmaking, optics, finishing, engraving, jewelry, clockwork. That's what they did there at that school. Students came from all over the country to study here. Mr. Hammond said on the 10-year anniversary of the Institute, the sphere of influence of this department at Bradley University is wider than any other. Its students are from every country, and its graduates are living an independent, industrious, and useful life by the aid of practical knowledge of the useful arts and sciences as Mrs. Bradley desired. So that was on the 10-year anniversary. This was really important to me. Bradley always admitted women. In 1897, Bradley admitted women. The only place I can find where the first president of the university and Mrs. Bradley had any kind of disagreement, he wanted to separate the men from the women. And she said, absolutely not. We have never talked about that. We are not separating. Everyone will learn in the same space. So I love that. Listen, I read like 4 books before I figured out like what was going on at Bradley Polytechnic Institute in 1897 because I was a little confused. It was like a 6-year program. Here's the deal. There was an academy. It was a high school. So 9th through 12th grades, you could come to the Bradley Academy and basically get your high school diploma, right? The Institute was a 2-year college program. We would call it a community college today. It was happening before community colleges existed, right? So you could come to Bradley for 6 years if you wanted to, and the goal was to make sure that you were trained and educated so that you could go on to one of these fine universities throughout the country. So when Mrs. Bradley got the idea that maybe this horology school is taking place and something that we can build on, she and her business manager started going to colleges all over the Midwest. How are you doing this? How does this work? How do we start one of these things? Like, what do we do? I love that. They did research in Illinois and Indiana, really trying to figure out, can we get our business plan set away? Mr. Hammond ends up in the office of William Rainey Harper, who is the president of the University of Chicago. He says, she doesn't have to wait till she passes away. We can do this right now, and I know how. Gets on a train that her husband probably built, comes to Peoria, and 10 days later, they're signing the paperwork to establish the Institute. That's how convincing he was. He's like, I know how to make this work. William Rainey Harper was the president of University of Chicago and Bradley University at the same time. Can you imagine? This is what's said about Mr. Harper. Dr. Harper was the one directly responsible for the change of plan by which the whole school was inaugurated during Mrs. Bradley's life. So something that she thought would happen after her death, she was able to realize in her lifetime. And she was actually able to celebrate the 10-year anniversary. A little bit about, oops, what did I do here? Just a little bit about the Institute. There's only 150 students, but that's because that's all that could fit. The workmen weren't done with Bradley Hall. They were banging on doors and walls for a whole another year. And by 10 years after that, there were over 700 students at Bradley Polytechnic Institute. Most of them, they called it Bradley Hall. I mean, we still call Bradley Hall, but that's the liberal arts side. Almost 200 in the horological school. And by 10 years into this, they had also started a summer school program for the local community where there was manual training and domestic education that took place. All right. That is how we got from A to B. And there is so much that happened along the way. I'll talk your ear off downstairs if you want to in a little bit. Would love to tell you some other stories about how Lydia Moss Bradley thoughtfully grew her wealth and contributed to this community in immeasurable ways, starting a home for widowed women, donating to the first hospital, was influential in the Peoria Women's Club, one of the single most important women in pioneer history in Illinois. In fact, I read a book on women pioneers. She's in the book with Mary Todd Lincoln and Jane Addams. She's right up there. She just isn't super flashy like the rest of them, right? All right. It's really important to me that we share the stories of some other folks who came after Lydia Moss Bradley. I want to tell you about Corinne. Corinne Unlin is from Beardstown, Illinois. Go down Route 24, hook a hard left, and you're there, right? And she was our first graduate. She got her diploma in 1898. She wasn't just the first graduate, she was the only graduate that year. And they had a ceremony for her. She transferred to the University of Chicago, probably with the influence of Dr. Harper. She got her Bachelor of Science in Philosophy and a Master's in Educational Administration. She married an alum, James Anderson. And I was able to follow the census records and be able to see where they moved, because the census taken every 10 years, it tells your address and your occupation. Her husband was a chemist, which took them to Houston. They had a child in Houston, took them to Kentucky. They had a child in Kentucky who unfortunately passed away. So through census records, I could tell that Corinne had become a teacher somewhere along the line in Chicagoland. But what I found out 3 weeks ago, she wasn't just a teacher. I found her obituary. She was a principal for 17 years at Argo Community High School. Argo Community High School, well, this is a snippet of some of the early graduates of Bradley Polytechnic Institute. Argo Community High School is almost 4 miles due west of what is now Midway Airport, just to give you some orientation. She opened the school. She was a teacher. She was the principal. She was the dean of students. Her starting salary was $2,000. When she started in 1920, there were 19 students at that school. When she retired in 1937, there were over 400. They had seen a dip during the Great Depression. And I want to tell you what the Board of Education said about her upon receiving her resignation. Mrs. Anderson is one of the most devoted workers, a leader in the educational field, a counselor of thousands of our local youth, a woman of keen intellect and impeachable integrity. They were truly sad to see her go. So when I found out that she'd worked at this school, then I go down the rabbit hole, and there's this whole book written about the school here, the history of the school, and this is where I found these delightful pictures of her sitting at her desk as a principal at Argo Community High School. So that's how research works. Corinne undoubtedly had a tremendous influence over hundreds and hundreds of young people and taught and led, even as she herself led an independent, industrious, and useful life. I love that picture of her. This is colorized with the use of AI, full disclosure. All right, I have a confession. The next woman that I chose to talk about is Dr. Joan Scott Wallace, but I want to tell you what intrigued me about her was that she'd worked for the federal government. And as a political scientist, I always think that's really cool. And she'd worked for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which I thought was doubly cool, right? Illinois agriculture. That's not even the greatest thing about her. What I learned is that Dr. Joan Scott Wallace had a tremendous higher education career. All 3 of the women that I'm showcasing today have strong education careers. Joan Scott Wallace was born in Chicago in 1930. Her father is a famous artist. And in fact, you'll see a picture of one of his paintings. Before she died, she donated a painting that her father did to Bradley University. His art is still shown all over the world. Her parents wanted her to be a doctor, right? You want your doctors, lawyers. Today we want them to be plumbers and be able to install drywall on my floor, right? That's the most important thing. So she came to Bradley diligently, and she came in as pre-med. I have to tell you something fascinating. As I was finishing my thoughts about Dr. Wallace, I found a treasure trove on the internet. She participated over 20 years ago in an oral history project, and she was interviewed by a gentleman, and there are about 2 or 3 dozen clips of her speaking and telling her own story. So you're able to hear her tell in her own words what it was like to be a student at Bradley, what it was like to live in Peoria, what it was like to do all these things. So she said she switched her major. And she said, we had one black teacher who taught anthropology. Everybody loved him, and he was kind of a father to all of us. And the interviewer says, what was his name? Dr. Romeo B. Garrett. That changed the trajectory of her entire life. And I know that we've heard amazing things about Dr. Garrett and his tremendous influence, but he changed her life. She graduated Bradley in 3.5 years. After that, she transferred to Columbia University in New York City, where she got her master's in social work. She also met her husband there and got married, returned back to Chicago and practiced social work. But she very shortly thereafter became engaged in educational processes with social work. So many times she was a dean or a vice president. She was an expert in her field. She started her PhD at Northwestern when she was 40. That's totally relatable. I started my PhD when I was 39 years old. She studied social psychology, and her dissertation is on the Black student experience at Baruch College, where she was the director of African American Studies. We could literally talk for about an hour on her. She is truly an amazing woman. I am not doing her justice. If you just look at this resume, every single bullet point on here is truly astounding. Dean at Howard University for social work, VP at Morgan State, director at Western Michigan. And in 1977, she was appointed to be one of the assistant secretaries for the Department of Agriculture under the Jimmy Carter administration. But what thrilled me was when I heard her talk to the interviewer about this. You thought, oh, she must be politically connected. She wasn't a farmer. Her dad was an artist. She didn't know anything about corn or agriculture. She put in an application to work for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Her application quickly surfaced to the top. Wouldn't you hire a woman like this who has these credentials and these kind of people skills and this management and this intellect? She got sat down at the interview, and he says, I'm going to offer you a job today, and I'd like you to accept it. And she's like, okay, what's the job? He's like, I'm offering you the assistant secretary of the Department of Agriculture. She says, I'll think about it and get back to you. And her husband was like, what do you mean you told him you'd think about it? She served in public service from 1977 until 1993. She served under many presidents. She was also appointed by President George H.W. Bush to represent us in Trinidad and Tobago with the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture. She retired in 1993, kind of, her fake retirement. She moved to Florida, and I say fake retirement because she couldn't stay away from higher education. She went to Florida International University and, again, was an instructor at the School of Social Work there. She passed away several years ago. But it's truly delightful to be able to hear her voice and to hear her stories. When she was this is the painting that her father did of her. She was also in community theater in Peoria. She talks about that. When asked how she would like to be remembered, Joan Scott Wallace said, as being a fair person, I mean, as a manager, I tried to be fair. In conflict, I tried to be fair. Those were her words, how she wants to be remembered. Dr. Wallace was here at Bradley in 2004. This picture was taken by our favorite photographer, Dwayne Zare, in 2004. It's one of the best pictures I was able to find of her online. And when asked if there was anything else she wanted to share in her memories, she said this. I used to have a favorite phrase. I haven't used it in a while, but when I gave speeches, I used to say, when the door of opportunity opens, be ready to put your foot in. Well, I usually added, and leave it open for your brother and your sister. When I heard her say that, I had to tell you, it took my breath away just a little bit. The very last line of my book that I wrote and came out last year, I talk about walking up the Capitol steps and everything that I've learned and holding the door open for the next generation coming after me. I'm like, oh, we probably would have gotten along really, really well. I am so delighted to know about Dr. Joan Scott Wallace and her influence in the world, in education, and in our government. The last person I want to showcase is somebody that I know, Ingrid Gunnell. She graduated in 1996. She's a friend of mine. We didn't cross. We met in social circles. I had graduated, and then she became a freshman. Ingrid's from Glendale, California. She's the fourth of five children. And she told me that her requirements for a university were she had to be in a different time zone than her parents, and it had to have a strong elementary education component. She applied to 7 colleges and universities and got into every single one of them. Came to campus in 1996 or 1992 and was enamored. The education program here was so strong, and she felt very welcomed at Bradley University, and she graduated in 1996. She was also lured by the dorm of the future. Was anybody around during that boondoggle which meant like you were hooked to Chris, which meant you were hooked up to a mainframe and could print stuff out in Hostler Hall. That's what Dorm of the Future meant in 1992. It predated, but they got you hooked in. You had a computer in your room, and that was a really big thing back then, the Dorm of the Future. Ingrid has been a school teacher for 25 years, minus 9 strike days. Those are her words. She was famously with the LA Unified School District in 2019, where they went on strike for 19 days, fighting for teachers' rights, for better pay, to make sure public money was being used for public education. She took a position with the district several years ago as, I don't know, it's got some funky bureaucratic name, but essentially what she did is she made sure that teachers, nurses, and certificated employees knew their path to succession on the pay grade, help them navigate those bureaucratic waters so that they could continue to move up on the pay scale. In 2022, she ran for the Glendale School Board, and she won her election by 127 votes, which is truly amazing. That's a very slim margin. And in 2023, she left the school district and became a political organizer for the largest federation of teachers' unions in the state of California. So now she works hard at that every day. 2 weeks ago, Ingrid was elected the president of the Glendale School Board. That picture on the right is her dad holding the local newspaper in Glendale with the headline that his daughter is now the school board president. What a tremendous career in education. And I said to her, I talked to her last week and interviewed her, and I said, you're fighting for people who don't even know that they need fighting for. And she said, thank you. You get it. You get it. I know this is an old logo, and I don't care. I think I finally understood this logo like 2 weeks ago. I thought it was the ugliest logo when I was a student. I'm like, how ugly could that be? But when you understand that logo, science, industry, literature, that's what Lydia Moss Bradley embodied. You also know that she loved roses, right? That rose is in the middle, and the leaves around that. Sorry, if any of you in here designed the logo, I apologize. Computer graphics have come a long way since then. You know, we could talk for days about the influence of Lydia Moss Bradley. She was important not only to Peoria, but to the greater community in central Illinois. She was a mother, a wife, a businesswoman, an entrepreneur, and a philanthropist. She cared about widows, the hospital, started the first park district in all of Illinois, here in Peoria. After they wouldn't create Laura Bradley Park and sat on that, she's like, fine, if I give you more acreage, would you create a park district? And they're like, okay, fine. That's how that happened. That is Midwest tenacity. That is stick-to-itiveness. That is, I'm not going to take no for an answer. She has done so much for the community and for Bradley University. I was talking to Tom, an alumni, yesterday, and we talked about the pictures of Mrs. Bradley. First of all, it's a privilege to have your picture taken in the 1800s. Hardly anyone could afford that. The old daguerreotypes, the shutter had to be open for minutes and minutes. So it was a lot easier to stand like neutral face instead of smiling for 10 minutes. So a lot of her pictures look really somber and stern. That's not who I think she was. On the 10-year anniversary of Bradley Polytechnic Institute, she opened her home. All the students came over. She smiled and laughed and had a good time. I believe she was probably a very warm woman. She just kept things very, very tight-knit and kept her friends really, really close. So I share this picture. This is actually my favorite picture of Mrs. Bradley. I share that with you. I colorized it, just in case you wondered. But she's very old. She's standing outside of her house. And it reminds me of independent, industrious, and useful life. I mentioned, how are we doing on our commitment to make sure we're serving people of the local area, the Peoria area and the vicinity? Of our approximately 70,000 alumni, about 14,000 live within a 60-mile radius of Peoria. Of our current enrolled students, about 3,000 are from Illinois, and 856 are from the Tri-County area. I think we're doing pretty well serving Peoria and the greater community. It's been an honor to share these stories with you today. I hope that something in you has sparked a little bit. Perhaps you learned something new. Perhaps you'll think about the people in your lives, what you're doing to live a good and useful and industrious life. But I'm grateful to be an alum of Bradley University. I live in Utah, where not a lot of people know about Bradley, but I'm happy to champion that cause. I was honored to serve on the Alumni Board of Directors for 6 years, come back to Peoria quite frequently, and try to make alumni programs that reach outside of Central Illinois to make sure to engage those alumni. It's been a privilege. I want to thank the staff here at Bradley who have answered every question that I had and pulled every bit of research that they possibly could to make this happen. And thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. And I just wanted to share, Wendy was a little modest. Here is her book, and it is one of the fabulous prizes you can win at our 6 o'clock program, which will happen downstairs. Thank you so much for enjoying the lecture with us today. I hope that you really did enjoy learning more about Lydia Moss Bradley. What an amazing woman and legacy that she left us all. A couple just housekeeping. Please grab some snacks on the way out. There's actually lots more yummy snacks on the first floor. Help yourself enjoy some food, beverages. Don't forget to go find the Lydias, take a walk, get your steps in, bring your card back to us, and we'll give you our prize. The bookstore is open. The library is open. The folks in the library are really excited to see you all. So I do hope that you take a moment to go over to the library. Again, my name is Molly, and Tom stepped in the room. I wanted to make sure everyone knows Tom Richmond. He's my manager, and he and I champion the 70,000 alumni for Bradley University right now. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's give Dr. Wendy Davis and Lynette another round of applause. The time that was put into this lecture, I know it was a labor of love. And it truly just blossomed like your red rose up here on the stage. So thank you. If anyone wants a photo with them, we're all ready for you over here. The paparazzi are here as well. So, hey, let's have some fun and celebrate Lydia. And we'll see you for the program at 6 p.m. on the first floor.